We now conclude the first lesson in our series Introducing Assessment. So the first two parts on Introduction to Assessment and how students learn, if you missed them, are part of the same playlist. They're in this same YouTube channel. And now we're going to be looking at different assessment items, particularly objective and subjective items. And we're going to be looking at the most popular forms of assessment. It's not completely comprehensive, but it covers a lot of it. So objective items are ones that have indisputable correct and incorrect answers. These ones are easily machine scored. And one of the simplest examples is the true-false question. These are about as easy to score as they get. Right? It is right or wrong, and there's only two options. The disadvantage is that it's relatively easy to guess. You can give me a true-false test in a language that I don't even recognize, let alone speak or comprehend, and I've got a decent shot at getting 50%, because I've got a 50-50 chance of getting any particular question correct. And if you have specific determiners, like always or never, then they get even easier to guess, because almost every rule has exceptions. So if you're not talking about mathematical or scientific constructs, and even then not as often in science, then there always is some wiggle room, and you could find exceptions to almost every rule. So when you see words like always or never, then that's a dead giveaway that this is probably going to be false, because there are exceptions to almost everything. It's also hard to reach the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy, not just the two highest levels that require student-created input and can't be done by machine score, but in terms even of getting to the analysis level. It's very difficult to construct a true-false question that requires analysis. Now, fill-in-the-blank questions are also fairly easy for a human to score. Right? You check the blank. Was it filled in correctly or not? It's typically a word at a time. And the fact that we can use free-form answers in most cases makes them harder to guess. Now, if you give them a list of words to pick from, it's really more matching than fill in the blank. If you just say fill in these blanks with no vocabulary list and the students just have to know how to fill it in based on the content, then you have a lot more to pick from, and it becomes much more difficult to randomly guess the correct answer. Unfortunately, the fact that they're just words and blanks also means it's harder to machine score with low-cost technology. So even though it's easy for a human to score it, it is more time-consuming. And given that teaching is a high-stress profession and a time-consuming profession, where 60% of all people who enter the profession quit and burn out in their first 3 years, we want to try and maximize our efficiency here so we don't end up in that burnout pile and switch careers. Another downside is that it's hard to reach the higher levels of Bloom's taxonomy. Again, you can fairly easily get to the comprehend or application levels, but analysis is much more of a challenge with fill in the blank. And the synthesis and evaluation simply require student-created content. Matching questions, again, are easy to score. They are hard for students to guess when they are properly designed. So the words to pick from are of a similar type. And you have verbs or adjectives. Right? If there's only one noun on the list, you could figure out what that is just based on the fact that this blank needs to have a noun. So one of the downsides is that they are often poorly designed. Right? If you have a list where you should use each word exactly once, then if it's out of 10 questions and the student only knows 9, they can deduce number 10 without actually understanding it. So that the fact that they got that item correct is not an indicator of their understanding of the material. And that is the ultimate goal, is to have that mark reflect their understanding of the material. So we should have matching types of items. We should have answers that can be used once, more than once, or not at all. And again, it is much more challenging to reach the higher levels of Bloom taxonomy with matching questions. Now, multiple choice are still easy to machine score, and there's a lot of scanning machines available to schools that will do this for us automatically as long as you're using the right forms. They tend to be more versatile. Multiple choice questions can make it easy to hit that fourth level of Bloom's taxonomy. And each option that you add makes it harder to guess. So a 3-question multiple choice, you got a 1 in 3 shot of guessing correctly. 5-question, now you're down to 20%. Of course, that is assuming that those incorrect items, or the so-called distractors, are appealing and reasonable, and not obviously incorrect. And that's one of the downsides to multiple choice. It can be very difficult to make a good distractor. And again, we can get to the fourth level of Bloom's taxonomy fairly easily, but not to the last 2. Numeric response questions are also a possibility. They are effectively fill in the blank, but easier to machine score. The downside is those blanks have to be numbers. They take up more paper than a typical multiple choice. So if you think about it in terms of a Scantron, 1 row will give you the options for multiple choice, but you might need 11 or 12 rows to get the digits 0 to 9, and then you might need decimals, fractions, negative signs. There's a lot of other bubbles you can fill in. And some scoring software doesn't give the level of error analysis for these questions that you can get for multiple choice. And another part is that the perception is that the usefulness is often limited to mathematical courses. So math itself, physics, some problems in chemistry, when in fact it could be used for a number of things, especially if the system allows more than one correct answer. So you could have a list of politicians, as well as a list of timeframes and a list of policies implemented, and have students match them correctly. So there can be more than one combination of which politician was elected in which era and produced which policy, so that more than one of these is permitted. I've heard them referred to as choose-your-own-adventure questions, where the students just have to pick a matching combination with more than one combination possible. And that can be scored with numeric response if the system that you're using accepts more than one correct answer. And again, anything machine scored is hard to reach the highest levels of Bloom's taxonomy. There are also subjective items. So there's always some degree of subjectivity in scoring because these virtually have to be done by humans. So there have been some major improvements in machine scoring of text items, particularly during these COVID pandemic years that we are finally coming out of. But those systems are still not reliable enough for really high stakes testing. And because it allows students to create their own ideas and put them down, these subjective items are the ones that can go to all levels of Bloom's taxonomy. So if you have short answer, where you're giving an answer in maybe a paragraph at most, well, you can probe that deeper understanding, but it's difficult to machine score, which means it's going to be time consuming for the teacher to get these done properly and return them. And you may also find that a student with limited writing ability may not be able to convey accurately their understanding of other outcomes. So if you have a student who understands the politics of World War II, but speaks a language other than that used in the classroom as their first language and struggles with the classroom language, it may be difficult for them to convey that understanding on the page. The essay questions are similar. So these can probe to the deepest levels of understanding because you have a lot more space to work with. These are probably the most time-consuming questions to mark, and they are extremely difficult to machine score with reasonably priced technology available today. And we still may have those limitations with the student writing ability. And then we also have student presentations. So this is where the student presents, possibly with a slideshow, possibly just with a speech, but it's not a written task. So it probes the deepest levels of understanding. Downside is you have to mark it live. So you can't turn them in and do it when you're in a mood for marking on a Saturday afternoon. You've got to be right there as the teacher and focused on that presentation, which means you're not necessarily focused on the other students in the room at the time. Again, machine scoring is pretty much out. You can have students who struggle to communicate in a given language that limits their ability to accurately convey their level of understanding of the outcomes we're looking at. It can be time-consuming to do it in class. A written test can be done by the entire class simultaneously, but student presentations, they need to take turns. Even if they're on the same team, you generally only have one student speaking at a time. And finally, if you don't have slideshows or something handed in advance or prepared in advance, you may have students who see one presentation make edits on their own to reflect that, which gives them a bit of an advantage over the earlier presentations. So that wraps up the different types of assessment items. And that also concludes part 1 of this 9-part series. Part 2 will look more closely at different types of assessments and ways to report the results to the students. So please come back and join us for that.